On our top story now, opposition parties were quick to grill President Cyril Ramaphosa on Eskom in Parliament today. The National Assembly was debating last week's State of the Nation address. The utility has embarked on another round of load shedding. Yesterday, Cyril Ramaphosa expressing shock and anger at Eskom, but parties have questioned the president's disbelief when he has been intimately involved in matters at the state-owned enterprise. Political analyst Lukhona Mnguni joins us now to discuss this. Perhaps before we can get to what political parties had to say, Lukhona, this afternoon in Parliament, let's go back to that comment that President Cyril Ramaphosa made yesterday from Addis Ababa upon hearing of this stage 4 load shedding.
We've heard that there's stage 4 load shedding. Now that comes as quite a shock because it's reported that there are 6 units that have gone down. Now that is most worrying, most disturbing, and it has shocked me and has also made me quite angry that we've reached this stage of dysfunctionality.
Well, shocked and angry as the president says he is, opposition parties this afternoon didn't seem to care. For them, it showed that he is simply not in charge.
Well, Vuyo, I think it shocked many people that the president would express himself in that manner of being shocked and angered. We're still with not so much of facial expressions accompanying the feelings he was trying to communicate. And it makes him appear as though he is quite dislocated from the running of what is a critical institution in what he has been embarking on, the investment drive. If the president wants to succeed in jump-starting the economy, you've got to have reliable energy supply, and Eskom has been a problem that he is aware of. And I think I'm picking up a situation where either the president is underplaying what he knows, or the president is simply lethargic in how he engages with Eskom, or worst still, he is a bit deceitful to the South African public. The president has been involved, as you've indicated, since about end of 2014 with matters pertaining to Eskom. Now, you can argue that he wasn't the president, there were other forces inside Eskom that could have sabotaged the kind of work he was expected to do when he chaired that war room on Eskom, and therefore he didn't have the space to act or to influence actions. But Vuyo, he appointed a board, a new board, in January 2018. Of course, that board was challenged for a variety of reasons, particularly in terms of the skill set that it was bringing together that were not necessarily seen as appreciating the agency to which Eskom needs people with engineering know-how, with energy know-how to try and help it to turn around. So, but in the last year, he has nobody to blame but himself if he is still to be shocked and angered, because he has had ample time. And then in December, he appointed a task team, Vuyo, because he was realizing that the board wasn't doing what it was meant to do. So the task team was meant to go back and do a lot of research and assess the situation at Eskom and report back to him in January. Now, we must sit here and wonder, when he made the pronouncements he made during the State of the Nation address last week, on what evidence did he base those pronouncements? If the board last night issues a statement that says they are now going to do an in-depth audit to try and get a granular understanding of what exactly is happening at Eskom. The entire value chain, Vuyo, from the executive at Eskom to the board at Eskom to the government and the presidency, the entire value chain seems quite in its 6s and 7s, unknowing what to do, unknowing what is happening. That is far more critical than the blackouts themselves in actual fact.
You see, which brings me to this question, Lukhona, because if, as you say, he's been involved, and for the past 5 years, he chaired that war room, as you say, the minister responsible for public enterprises, Pravin Gordon met with the Eskom board yesterday, and from what he has told us this afternoon, they are going to appoint consultants who are going to determine what is going on. One wonders then just how much of that plan that Eskom came up with late last year was interrogated. And whatever it is that the government accepted as a way forward that the Eskom board and executives put on the table, whether that wasn't based on, familiarity with one another instead of facts that had been interrogated and where government would have convinced itself that Eskom was on the right path.
Well, they do seem to be kicking for touch. I mean, now if you are going to be going to consultants, this is now the third team that is going to be put on Eskom. So you've got the board, you've got the task team of experts, and then you now have the seeking of counsel of consultants, external consultants. 3 teams, you're kicking for touch. You're not about to resolve the problem. The president said in his Sona Vuyo, Eskom has a 9-point plan that they are going to be implementing. He didn't even give us 1 point of that 9-point plan. And we're quite used to this where we are told, oh no, there's a plan somewhere, but we're not going to reveal it to you. I think the first thing that government ought to do where this Eskom thing is concerned is to communicate a bit more transparently with a greater deal of clarity in terms of what are the core problems. When you take an entity like Eskom, Vuyo, it's a big entity, but it is premised on quite open fundamentals because it's entirely an engineering setup. So when you say a unit has tripped, you carry out an investigation and say this is what has led to the trip. Because we kept on talking about poor maintenance at Eskom, and yet at the same time we say Eskom has an oversupply of labor. So what is the problem that we are actually looking at? And we need to now probably be taken into the power stations themselves and have a much more engineering conversation with government, and I think government needs to visit there, understand what is triggering these trips. A unit doesn't just trip, it's because there is a fault in the system, but is the fault something that could have been predicted? Is the fault because planned maintenance has not been happening? Is it a breakdown because there's been tampering? Is it because of the poor supply of coal in terms of contaminated coal that actually affects the plants and all of this? So we need to have a much more serious conversation, and I think politicians are politicizing something that could actually be spoken about in relatively technical terms, quite understood technical terms, and unpacked for all of us to understand what is the scale and the nature of the problem. And I don't think you need consultants for that, because Eskom has engineers who are at the coalface in these units and are actually trying to deal with these faults as they come to being.
Lukhona, we've run out of time, but I have to ask you quickly, does this not raise the question then that if the government believes that breaking down Eskom is the solution, what was that premised on then if they don't know in the first place what it is that is wrong with the entity?
No, as I've said, Vuyo, but I think we would need more time to unpack that particular proposal. But as I've said, it seems as if there was no much evidence-based. It seems as if the baiting of external influencers to the ANC who have been drumming up the support for this idea of breaking up Eskom into 3. But even the president announced a breaking up that still maintains a common holding for the 3 entities that would create generation, transmission, and distribution. That, of course, is not enough because it still doesn't deal with the debt problem. By the way, even if you break it up, only if you privatize, it will make sense. And the only 2 segments you can privatize, which are not debt-laden as much as the other one, is transmission and distribution. Your generation will still really leave debt in the hands of government. You will still not solve your debt problem. Our problem at Eskom currently is debt, and the breaking up of Eskom seems, Vuyo, lastly, to be premised on the desire to create space for Eskom to borrow even more. Now, that is not what you want to do. You can't break up, create space for more debt accumulation, because in 5-10 years' time, you'll be back in the same position again.
Lukhona Mnguni, that's where we're going to leave it. Thanks very much for your time. Political